Before we get into trivia, it's time to throw it over to Mikey P with your Rangers Ed 150, the fastest 150 seconds in the National Hockey Podcast League.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rangers Ed 150. We are back after our trade deadline show, and the Eastern Conference is a wild place to be playing hockey at the moment. Before we get to the East, though, we have to take a look out West, and as usual, we'll start with the Pacific Division, where the Vegas Golden Knights have finally got it together, putting up a 7-1-2 record through their last 10, with big wins over the Devils and Hurricanes last week. Kings shipped out Jonathan Quick at the deadline and two significant pieces in Jonas Korpisalo between the pipes and Vladislav Gavrikov on the blue line came back. These two guys should help remedy some of the Kings' defensive woes. Kings are sitting up in second place ahead of the Kraken, and with the add of those two guys, they really become a dark horse out of the West that could surprise some people as the playoffs approach. Edmonton's ascent through the standings has stopped at fourth place for the moment, with Vegas, LA, and Seattle all on 3+ game win streaks. But McDavid put in another 2-goal performance last night against the Sabres, and the Oilers are really pushing hard to crack that top three in the Pacific. In the Central Division, the Dallas Stars have seemingly forgotten how to score goals after their torrid first half of the season. Stars are 4-3-3 through their last 10, and in doing so, they've allowed the Minnesota Wild to catch up in the points column. Dallas is still in first place with 81 points, but Minnesota Wild have been on a ridiculous heater of late, putting up an 8-1-1 record through their last 10, with wins this past week over the Islanders, Canucks, and Flames. Finally, the Winnipeg Jets are worth a mention here as they fall into third place on the back of some incredibly poor play of late. The Jets have dropped games to San Jose, Edmonton, LA, the Islanders, and Colorado in recent weeks. They're riding a stellar 2-6-1 record through their last 10, and to top it all off, the Jets' misery, Colorado is now only 1 point back in the standings with 3 games in hand over the Jets. So in all likelihood, we will see the Avalanche finally crack that top 3. Back east we go in the Atlantic Division, where to nobody's surprise, the Boston Bruins are still in first place and are riding a 10-game win streak. Toronto and Tampa are still holding on to the 2 and 3 spots, respectively, but both of these clubs are dealing with their fair share of adversity at the moment. Ryan O'Reilly is sidelined for 6 to 8 weeks with a broken finger for the Leafs. Should be back in time for the playoffs, but Toronto continues to drop games to opponents that they should not. And their defense and goaltending are still the Achilles heel of this team, despite the addition of O'Reilly and McCabe at the deadline. Last week, they lost 4-1 to Vancouver and 5-2 to Edmonton. Both games the Leafs should be winning at this point in the season. The Lightning are another story entirely. In their last 5 games, they have lost 6-0 to the Hurricanes, 5-3 to Buffalo, 5-4 to Pittsburgh, 4-1 to the Panthers, and 7-3 to Pittsburgh again. Bolts have been outscored 27-11 through this stretch of games, and to boot, Victor Hedman left last night against the Hurricanes after going awkwardly into the boards and is set to miss a game tonight against the Flyers. Not necessarily time to pull the ripcord yet on this team, but after an underwhelming trade deadline where they overpaid by about 4 draft picks for Tanner Janot, it's definitely time to be a bit concerned about this team facing off against the offensively gifted Leafs in the playoffs. Finally, in the Metro Division, 1 through 5 have not changed since we last talked, and the standings still sit at Carolina, New Jersey, Rangers, Islanders, and Penguins. The Devils have closed the gap to just 2 points with the Canes, and there's still a strong possibility that we could be seeing a Rangers-Canes first-round series. Canes have a relatively easy couple of games coming up this week with Montreal and Philly, but the Devils and Canes face off on the 12th of this month in a game that could flip-flop 1 and 2 in this division, so stay tuned for that next week. The Islanders and Pens are also still hanging on to the 1 and 2 wild card spots, but Buffalo's breathing down New York's neck with 3 games in hand and a big face-off tonight between the two clubs. Also important to note here that Pittsburgh is also at risk of losing out to one of the league's other young and upstart teams in the Ottawa Senators, who are sitting 3 points back of the Penguins for that final wild card spot. We've had an exciting run of hockey over the last few weeks since the All-Star break, and things are only going to heat up as the playoff races tighten, so stay tuned for some great hockey in the coming weeks. And as usual, see you next week for our 150.